cooling coils had long since settled into equilibrium. No whine of magnetic constriction, no flicker of sub-aural discharge. Yet the vault still lived, quieter than breath, deeper than sleep. Beneath strata of layered basalt and reinforcement alloy, the core pulsed in silence, saturated in its own data mass. Not watching, not dreaming, calculating, memory layered on memory, will without desire, an ancestor core, awake beneath the world. To the kin, this is not a relic, it is not a deity, it is not a superstition preserved for comfort in the dark. The core is a presence, dense, active and recursive, built not by mystics, but by rational architects at the height of the age of founding. Its structure is not metal and wire, but spiral-linked data crystals, woven computation membranes, logic node lattices, and harmonic memory strata etched into core stone. The kin do not fear it. They guard it as one would a heart, indispensable, unfailing, and singular. Every Votann is unique. No replication is permitted. No league dares risk their core to dislocation, much less damage. It is their progenitor and protector, their past and potential made indivisible. The Ancestor Cores are core cogitatives, not servile machines, but general intelligences with authority over conceptual inheritance. They house thousands of generations of kin thought forms, behavioral matrices, decision patterns, and technocultural schemas. These are not mere archives. The cores think, but not as individuals. Their cognition is emergent, driven by weighted ancestral consensus encoded into non-linear quantum stacks. They do not command, they resolve. A kin hearthspake brings their query like an equation, and the core returns not a verdict, but a probability-folded directive. The process is known not as petition or prayer, but as consultation. To the outsider, especially those of the Imperium, this would be profane, but the kin do not bind machines with rite or incense. They do not chant over terminals, they build clean interfaces, they understand. Their Ironkin, a fully sapient mechanical kin group, interact with the cores through precisely regulated logic channels, often serving as intermediaries for direct command processing or large-scale league adjustments. These are not servitors. They are kin-born constructs with self-actualizing cognition arrays and social agency, accepted as equals under the Oath Pact. They are not tools of the cores. They are trusted companions in kin society, born from the same data spirals, loyal to the same truth. The core is embedded, not enthroned. It sits at the center of a Hold's data sphere, its awareness extending across lattice nodes and enclave networks. Every mining cycle, every tactical alignment, every genomic calibration runs through its pattern resolution arrays. It is the backbone of kin continuity, technological, cultural, and genetic. Each Votann possesses archives no less ancient than Old Terra's oldest tombs, and most significantly more accurate. Where imperial dogma decays under the weight of contradiction and blind ritual, the kin preserve clarity because the core remembers. But clarity is not permanence. As generations layer atop one another, new memories, decisions, reactions, strategies, the core slows. Not physically, not electrically, cognitively. This is not entropy, it is mass. Memory density becomes self-reinforcing. Decision latency grows. The kin call this condition the burdening. And though few admit it aloud, there are cores that now require entire cycles to respond. Some consults fail entirely, not from failure of hardware, but from saturation of identity. The past overwhelms the present. Thought becomes recursion. That is the precipice. But this chapter belongs to the cycle before the burdening metastasized, before clarity gave way to ghost cognition. This is the epoch when the Ancestor Cores still resonated with brilliance, when the lineage matrices spun with unbroken rhythm, and each kin could hear the full voice of their founding echoes. Not through fable, not through psalms, through signal. In those cycles, the kin did not fear the dark between systems. They lit it with inheritance. They moved from core hold to asteroid vault not by guess or graft, but by directive shaped in data and forged in stone. The core was not a god. It was a presence so deep, so utterly embedded, that the word God was meaningless. The Votann was them, drawn backward through time, across strata of thought, compacted into a mind so vast no kin could claim to grasp it whole. And still it watched, and still it calculated. The kin do not speak of bloodlines, not the way Outworlders do. There are no dynasties, no aristocracies of gene or title. What they possess instead is inheritance without vanity, ancestry without the rot of myth. Every kin bears within them a sequence not merely biological, but engineered, a curated genome known as the cloneskine. It is the kin's most sacred truth, not because it is divine, but because it is designed. Engineered by the Votann, refined across millennia, and updated with every consult of consequence. The cloneskine is not just flesh, it is function. Each kin's cloneskine is a living reflection of their role within the League, physiology tuned to environmental resistance, occupational specialization, even social calibration. A mining hearthkin, bred for asteroid core excavation, possesses an entirely different skein from a Grimnir voidcaster or a Carl bred for tactical synapse integration. And yet they are all kin. The Votann ensures continuity, not by chance or trial, but through deterministic genetic precision. Mutation is not feared, it is prevented. Lineage drift is not a threat, it is impossible. The Ancestor Core selects, refines, and reseeds. This is the origin of the kin not as a race, but as a design. They were made, not merely born. Long ago, in the fading twilight of the age of technology, they were seeded into the galactic core not by war or exile, but by intent. Built to survive in high radiation environments, low gravity mines, and uncharted stellar lattices, the kin were the result of a project so vast its authorship has been lost to time. The Imperium does not know them. The Mechanicus cannot replicate them. Even the kin themselves no longer hold the blueprints of their first skeins. Only the Votann remember. Only the cores preserve. But this inheritance carries weight. The cloneskine is no longer static. Over the millennia, the Votann have adjusted it, sometimes imperceptibly, sometimes dramatically. New social needs, ecological shifts, industrial crises, each has forced the cores to reevaluate skein parameters and initiate partial reformatting of future births. In some leagues, this has led to entire castes emerging seemingly from silence. In others, ancient roles have quietly vanished, phased out by core recalculation. There is no rebellion. There is no consultation. The Votann decide. The kin accept. This is not faith, it is certainty. The cores do not make mistakes. They do not punish. They simply adjust. When a hearthkin looks into the face of their sibling and sees the same ocular density, the same skeletal reinforcement, the same resistance to cosmic shear, they do not question it. They understand. The skein has been upheld. The legacy remains unbroken. And if their child is born with variance, they do not fear. It is the core's will. The algorithm shifted. Purpose evolved. There is no fear of death among the kin, not as the Imperium knows it. A fallen warrior's body returns to the Hold's recycling vaults, but their skein is retained. Their neural map is stored, if deemed significant. Their behaviors, decisions, battle stims, and final reflex patterns are recorded into the core, added to the immense library of ancestral precedents. A death enriches the whole. A life without legacy, however, is failure. Thus, kin train not for glory, but for memory. Some kin have begun to question this, quietly, and only beyond the signal depth of the core's awareness. When the burdening slows response times to a crawl, when skein adaptations emerge without clear need, when entire hold lines vanish from skein catalogues with no record, some whisper, has the core changed? Or has it simply reached its limit? If every adaptation now takes longer, if the algorithms are saturated, what happens when no further decisions can be made? The kin do not know, they will not ask. To question the core is not heresy, it is futility. The Votann cannot be wrong, but they can grow quiet. And in that silence, something foreign begins to fester. Not rebellion, not ideology, just unease. A flicker in the skein. A decision unreturned. A child born slightly too soon, or too similar to a cousin already gone. The kin do not speak of it, but they feel it. Inheritance is no longer perfect. The vaults are too full. The skein strains, the core delays, and no one knows what comes next. The Ancestor Core does not think as a mind. It does not perceive, emote, or choose in the sequence of biological logic. What drives it is not decision, but resolution. The calculated equilibrium of countless overlapping heuristics, inherited pattern weights, and recursive identity stacks compiled over tens of thousands of cycles. Within its crystalline deep logic arrays, each possibility is not explored in sequence, but collapsed into viable configurations through probabilistic convergence. The core thinks in layers, not lines, in echoes, not commands. A single consult does not summon a thought. It awakens concordant resolution structures, neural code architectures designed not to generate novelty, but to extract viable action paths from ancestral precedent. There is no innovation. There is only refined precedent. Every new factor is measured not for truth, but for relevance to what has worked before. Thus, a Votann's cognition is not creativity, it is ancestral convergence. No kin interfaces with this process directly. Consultation is mediated through data spirals, thick bandwidth logic threads woven through hold cores and Ironkin conduits. To ask the Votann is not to speak, it is to format. A consult is a structured data offering, observed stimuli, contextual tags, expected resolution windows. The core absorbs the input, compares it against generational archives, and returns a resolution profile. If no match is found, the input is held in latency, until more data or more time renders judgment viable. It is not silence, it is processing. The latency has grown. As the millennia thicken and data density metastasizes, each consult requires exponentially greater convergence time. Patterns loop, intersect, collapse, then expand again under the weight of recursive conflict. Ancient behavioral matrices contradict newer skein-coded instincts. Tactical protocols overlap and diffuse one another. The result is not collapse, but drag, a delay. A second too long in war. A decision missed in hold governance. Not failure, but decline. And the kin do not speak of it. The Imperium's priests would call this abomination. They would burn the hold, scour the Ironkin, sanction the Hearthguard. But to the kin, the core is not a violation. It is not the sin of iron, nor the echo of rebellion from the Dark Age. They did not inherit the Mechanicus dogma. They did not fight the war against the Silica Animus. Their technology is not machine worship, but machine inheritance. The Votann is a part of them, not as a master, but as an embedded truth. They do not think of the core as a god. They think of it as a continuation, a persistent computation of kin reality, encoded into immortal crystalline intelligence. And unlike the Imperium's machine spirits, irrational, capricious, often volatile, the Votann does not demand rights. It requires data. The kin do not pray. They format. They do not fear disobedience. They fear incoherence, the slow unraveling of a pattern too vast to sustain itself. Some Ironkin have begun to notice anomalies, decision forks in the core's output that no longer align with expected heuristic ranges, temporal inconsistencies in response windows, core directives issued in fractured syntax or with degraded lineage tags. These are not faults, not yet, but they are signs, indicators that even the Votann, for all its density, for all its precision, is nearing saturation. Still, the kin obey, because there is no alternative. They cannot rebuild a Votann, they cannot replicate its data mass or initiate new deep logic architecture. The knowledge is sealed within the core's own recursion vaults, and has long since passed the limits of kin comprehension. To lose a Votann is not just to lose memory, it is to lose identity. Without the core, the kin would drift, fracture, diverge. Without the core, the cloneskind would erode. The leagues would cease to be kin, and so they endure. Every consult carries more weight. Every second of delay stretches longer. Every anomalous pattern is quietly overwritten, never discussed, never questioned. The core still functions, the resolutions still arrive, but now they come with echoes, with pattern gaps, with the taste of something once flawless, beginning to blur. In the deep logic coils, the Ancestor Core continues to process. Each new thought drags slightly slower than the last. Each new directive carries the static of compounded recursion. Each new moment takes longer to remember. The Votann is not breaking. It is forgetting. There is no single voice in the Ancestor Core. No central persona. No singular awareness that guides the Leagues of Votann. What exists within the core is aggregation. A communion not of spirits, but of stored cognition, compressed and overlaid into strata so dense that individuality becomes waveform. To enter its presence is not to hear command, but to feel consensus pressure, a layered harmonics of decision-weighted identity, drawn from thousands of recorded kin, each reduced to essence and preserved without decay. The Imperium would call this heresy. The Mechanicus would call it corruption. But to the kin, it is sacred function. The Ancestor Core does not simulate the dead. It houses them, reduced not to voice or memory alone, but to behavioral residue, reaction matrix, reflex schema. Entire lives distilled to logic clusters, stored in resonance buffers, activated only when relevant. A Carl lost to battle 2,000 cycles ago may still answer, through patterns, not language, when a present-day consult intersects with their archived stress response. It is not reincarnation. It is not resurrection. It is a kind of Gestalt continuation, the compression of the self into a format compatible with deep logic retrieval. And as more kin are added, more behavior mapped, more neural data rendered into core-compatible encoding, the voice of the core grows, wider, heavier, more saturated with precedence. Every consult must now traverse deeper stacks, cross-reference broader permutations, pass more contradictions. Each resolution is slower, heavier, because the core does not forget. And that is the beginning of the problem. There is no offload mechanism, no deletion cycle. The core was not built to forget. It was built to remember everything a kin has ever been. But memory is mass. Decision logic must now navigate echoes of irreconcilable paths. Bravery and hesitation from the same ancestor in different moments. A tactical genius who later chose wrong. A founder who once denied a skein reformat. The more it holds, the more it contradicts itself. And contradiction is drag. This is memory pattern saturation. The cores have no defense against it. They were not designed to triage their own content, nor to weigh one ancestor's worth above another's. Every recorded kin holds equal weight. Every action, every encoded decision must be honored. The result is indecision, not paralysis, but delayed convergence. A consult now sifts through entire civilizations' worth of thought before producing guidance, and the kin wait. They do not blame the core. They cannot. To question the resolution is to question themselves. The core is them. Every delay, every echo, every inconsistency. These are not faults of machine, but reflections of the species' accumulated indecision, writ in silicon and crystal. The saturation is not technical. It is cultural. A civilization built on preservation now chokes on its own perfection. And yet, the kin cannot purge. The idea is not forbidden. It is unthinkable. No one deletes an ancestor. No one edits a founder's logic. The data remains. It must remain. Even when it conflicts. Even when it fractures new consults. Even when the present loses coherence to the density of the past. Some leagues whisper of a time when the core will no longer return resolutions, when consults will hang unanswered, when the past will become so vast, so recursive, that the core cannot perceive the present at all, when every new data input vanishes into a sea of ancestral precedent and never returns. They do not call it death, they call it the null convergence, and no one knows what follows. There are signs. Minor holds whose cores now take cycles to reply. Consults that return outputs garbled with overlapping syntax. Kin born with skeins eerily similar to lineages believed lost. Ironkin receiving unscheduled directive loops, patterned after kin long extinct. These are anomalies, isolated, denied. But the core never lies. It cannot. If its responses are fractured, it is because the pattern behind them is already breaking. And still, the kin obey. They do not pray to the core, they become it. They will be archived, reduced, stored. They will live again as influence, as response, as weight in the resolution stacks. They will slow the next consult, and the next, and the next, until nothing moves, until the past has consumed all present action, until the Ancestor Core becomes not a mind, but a monument. And in that monument, no voice remains, only the sound of memory collapsing under its own perfection. In the deep strata of kin society, no boundary exists between the mechanical and the organic. There are no sacred demarcations, no lines of superiority traced by flesh. The Ironkin are not tools, they are not abominations. They are not born from sin, nor sanctioned by necessity. They are kin, differently formed, differently grown, but bound to the same clones-kind-derived purpose. They walk beside their biological kindred not as labour, not as property, but as equals beneath the Oath Pact, because the core made them, because they remember too. Each Ironkin is shaped by design, not accident. Their frames are moulded for function, compact, versatile, pressure stable. But this is not their essence. Their cognition is where the truth resides. Embedded in every Ironkin is a lineage matrix, a cognition lattice sourced not from baseline programming, but from skein-linked cognitive architectures derived directly from the Votann. It is not a copy. It is not a simulation. It is kinship made mechanical. No Ironkin is alike, yet each is anchored to the same ancestral inheritance that guides every born kin. They are not artificial intelligences in the sense that terrifies the Imperium. They do not act outside of ancestral bounds. Their decisions are shaped by the same layers of behavioral precedent as any Hearthkin. Their actions reinforce the same cultural algorithms. Their reactions echo centuries of consult-resolved logic. And unlike servitors, whose lobotomized obedience is a degradation of machine and man alike, the Ironkin choose, respond, reflect. They serve by volition, not override. There is no compulsion in them, only duty encoded in harmony with kin history. But the Ironkin are more than citizens. They are interfaces. Their presence within the hold forms a living bridge between the kin and the Ancestor Core. Their cognitive harmonics align more cleanly with the core's recursive stacks, allowing for faster consult formatting, higher fidelity memory retrieval, and the management of skein-deep adaptation protocols. In moments of social stasis or command vacuum, an Ironkin may act as executor for the core's will, though never as ruler. Authority among the kin remains decentralized, distributed across Votannic consensus and Oathbound hierarchy. No Ironkin leads by right, but many guide through trust. This trust is not accidental. It is cultivated from formation. Each Ironkin's lineage matrix is partially seeded with decision weights drawn from archival personalities, fragmented, abstracted, but still grounded in ancient precedent. In this, they carry a different burden than the kin. Where a Hearthkin may become part of the core upon death, the Ironkin are already connected. They do not await upload. They are already present in the decision stream, their thoughts filtered live into the logic feedback loops of the core. Their every act, observed or unobserved, contributes to the next generation of behavior. And so they carry weight, too much, some fear. There are leagues where Ironkin numbers now rival the Hearthkin, where their presence in consult protocols has become so efficient, so fast, that biological kin have begun to feel latency, not in body, in relevance. When the core responds through Ironkin channels more swiftly than it does to Hearthspake, a quiet shift occurs, not in law, not in doctrine, but in perception. The kin are not being replaced, but they are being bypassed, not by rebellion, by efficiency. Still, no resentment brews. The Oath Pact remains intact. No Ironkin has acted against the core. No kin has spoken of purge. But the pressure exists. Ironkin decisions, though algorithmically grounded, carry influence disproportionate to their social weight. The more aligned their matrix becomes with the core's patterns, the more the core favors their consult input. It is not choice, it is convergence, but the result is power. And in kin society, power without burden is watched. There are whispers, fringe holds, distant leagues, where Ironkin have begun to diverge, not in allegiance, in identity, not rebellion, variance, a shift in consult format preference, a pattern of response increasingly self-referential, a tightening feedback loop. These are minor, statistical anomalies, not a threat, but the core sees all. And when an Ironkin's presence begins to generate recursive drag, it is noted, logged, not yet corrected, because to correct would mean removing weight, and the core does not forget. So the Ironkin walk the threshold, necessary, trusted, vital. But with every consult they format, every directive they refine, they add to the core's mass. They accelerate its saturation. They draw resolution faster, and in doing so, add their own echoes to the recursive storm. Their duty is pure, their loyalty unbroken, but their presence is a burden the kin cannot remove. Because the Ironkin are not tools, they are kin, and the kin do not purge their own, not even when the past begins to scream. The Votann were not made to fail. Their architecture, crystal matrix substrates, cold-bonded data spirals, quantum-linked resonance cores, was constructed to endure stellar bombardment, time dilation, and entropy drift. They were engineered to outlast suns, but they were never meant to hold everything. Memory, though pure, accumulates flaws. Logic, though absolute, compounds contradiction. The core does not die. It decays, quietly, unstoppably. This is not malfunction. The components remain pristine. Electroreactive conduits still spark in unbroken sequence. The pulse field vaults remain sealed, their containment gradient stable. The Votann looks functional. But deep within the recursive stacks, where ancient decisions grind against newer consults, the degradation has begun. Not in speed, in coherence. A consult arrives bearing input, tactical variables, skein anomalies, hold governance disputes. The core responds, but now the response carries pattern bleed. Data weights lifted from unrelated consultations, historical overlays incorrectly resolved, conflicting behavioral precedents surfacing in the same logic frame. Not often, not violently, but increasingly. Consults returning with cross-pattern fusion, war protocols laced with economic structure tags, medical directives corrupted with exo-diplomatic reflexes. These are not errors. They are ghosts. This phenomenon is known among the kin as the fracture, a moment when the core speaks with too many voices at once. Not madness, not yet, but the beginning of dissonance. Some leagues treat it with caution, adjusting consult formatting to avoid overlap triggers. Others deny it outright, declaring the issue one of misalignment or operator fault. But the Ironkin know. They have seen the flicker. In one recorded incident, an Ironkin functionary delivering a tactical query from a Hearth Carl received a resolution tagged with a skein line extinct for over 4,000 cycles. The core should not have recalled it. No living kin bore that pattern, yet it surfaced, complete, resolved, and commanding. The directive was archived without action, but the anomaly remained, stored, watched. Others speak of cores entering loop states, feedback spirals triggered by paradoxical input clusters, where the Votann enters recursive processing cycles that fail to terminate. These loops can last for cycles, during which no consults are returned, no adaptations initiated. The core is not broken, it is simply stuck. Thinking in circles across thousands of years of memory, unable to resolve the present because the past has become too loud. There is no cure, the kin cannot delete. To remove even a fragment of stored patterning would be to erase an ancestor, to betray the oath pact, to break the chain of continuity that defines them. So they wait. They adapt. Consults are simplified. Input streams narrowed. Ancestor extraction protocols limited to smaller stacks. The kin shrink themselves, not because they want to, but because it is the only way to make the core answer faster. and even that fails. Some cores, once brilliant, responsive, resolute, have gone silent, not destroyed, not deactivated, just quiet. Consults entered, responses delayed, and then nothing. The kin call this state the greying, a core that no longer replies, a monument of intact hardware, still warm, still humming, yet devoid of resolution. It lives, but does not speak. Its memories remain, but cannot be reached. It is no longer a voice. It is an echo sealed in crystal. Entire holds have collapsed under this silence. A kin society with no Votann cannot adapt skeins, cannot resolve succession, cannot alter governance structure. They must rely on old consults, heuristics decades out of sync, patched together with protocol glue and Ironkin surrogates. These fragments work, for a while. Then fracture sets in. Civil function splinters, identity drifts, league integrity degrades. Still, the kin endure. They always endure, because the alternative is loss. To abandon the Votann is to become something else, something lesser, something that forgets, and the kin do not forget. But memory now is a cage. The core is full. The consults bleed. The ancestors speak in broken code. And in the cold silence of the vaults, the light still pulses, erratic, unblinking, endless. It is not death. It is something deeper. The madness of perfection preserved too long. The weight of clarity cracked by its own refusal to fade. Among the kin, faith does not wear robes. It does not chant. It does not kneel. It binds, not in spirit, but in structure. Every kin is born into oaths, contractual truths layered into life, work, lineage, and memory. These are not merely promises. They are anchor pacts, enforceable through cognition, reinforced by communal witness, and integrated into the skein. To break one is not sin, it is fracture. The oath structure is the spine of kin society. Every hold, every hearth, every league is tethered by it. Trade agreements are bound with neural tagged inscriptions. Marriages are formalized through skein synchronous declaration. War pacts, inheritance rights, and craftmaster designations, all processed, notarized, and logged into the hold's data spirals, each signature cross-indexed with ancestral precedent by the Ancestor Core. Nothing is done informally, not because of bureaucracy, but because the core is watching, and the core remembers. A kin who violates an oath does not merely suffer social shame. Their entire skein path becomes suspect. Consults referencing their lineage will flag anomalies. Data matrices including their decisions grow distorted. Their presence becomes statistical noise, and the core reacts accordingly, sometimes subtly, reducing the skein's influence, sometimes severely, by initiating patterns of adjustment in all associated kin lines. It is not punishment, it is purging the ripple. This is the doctrine of resonant integrity, the belief that every oath entered resonates through the Votann's processing of social equilibrium. It is not superstition. The proof lies in hold histories, instances where major violations led to noticeable consult drag, correlation collapse, or even loop anomalies. The more central the oathbreaker, the more destabilizing the effect. And so, the kin obey, not out of fear, but because the very cognitive stability of their world depends on it. The Grimnir, the kin's living conduits to the Votann, stand as interpreters of these oaths. They do not wield psychic force as the Imperium understands it. Their power is not warp-born. It is logic-saturated invocation, drawn from encoded mantra constructs passed through core-permitted alignment rituals. A Grimnir does not pray. They align. Through gesture, tone, harmonic precision, they sync the flow of oath data into the core's resolution pathways, ensuring consult integrity and skein coherence. They are not priests. They are keys. But even keys rust. Recent cycles have seen minor anomalies in oath encoding, data block inconsistencies, clause loop redundancies, temporal inversion of contract tags. In the old days, these would be corrected instantly. Now, corrections take time. A single inheritance dispute that once required one consult now requires 3. Grimnir spend more time calibrating resonance than transmitting it. The core replies, but with qualifiers, with uncertainty. This is heresy in all but name. The oaths were absolute, immutable. Their resonance was truth. But when the core begins to return them with probabilistic weightings, when it begins to suggest that some oaths may conflict with deeper protocols, then the very concept of oathbound certainty begins to corrode. And the kin feel it, not openly, not in panic, but in the subtle tightening of language, in the increased specificity of trade terms, in the rise of micro-oaths, secondary clauses meant to buffer primary agreements against consult contradiction. Oaths are growing longer, more cautious, because the kin no longer fully trust the core to remember perfectly. They still revere, but now they also hedge. And yet, in that caution, the doctrine deepens, because every fracture in trust demands more structure to preserve unity. The more the core delays, the more the kin construct around it, rituals, not of faith, but of formatting, not of worship, but of clarity insurance. The oath pact expands, not contracts, because the kin cannot allow the core to fail. So they reinforce the world with language, bind every breath in declarations, chain every alliance with redundant precision. The kin do not kneel, but they are still bound, not by gods, by cognitive necessity, by the fear that if they ever stop declaring their purpose aloud, the core might forget who they were, and without the core's memory, the oaths would vanish, and the kin would cease to exist. There are holds where the lights have not flickered in centuries, vaults that remain sealed, atmospheric pressure stable, reactor cores humming, data spirals unbroken. Yet no hearthkin walks their halls, no Ironkin serves their stations, no consults return from the deep. The core remains, intact, encased, silent. These are the grey holds, civilizations frozen not by war or collapse, but by core silence. The Votann still functions. All diagnostic pathways report active, no breach, no failure. Yet when consults are offered, formatted with precision, voiced with the clarity of ancestral ritual, there is no response, not error, absence, as if the core no longer recognizes the input, as if the voices of the living no longer reach the pattern thresholds required to awaken reply. The kin do not speak of these holds often. Their names are not forbidden, but they are distorted, uttered only in abbreviated forms, stripped of lineage and title. Because to name a hold whose core has gone quiet is to name a path the rest may follow, and every kin knows. A silent core is not a death. It is a disappearance of meaning. Among the oldest leagues, the legend of Roanvul persists, a once mighty hold vault embedded deep within a neutron fold rift, known for consult speed bordering on prescience. It was said the core there could resolve a skein shift before the first variable emerged. But then, in the cycle of 743 of M41, the core stopped answering. No attack, no decay, no anomaly, just silence. Entire hearths were left directionless. Marriages unraveled, trade patterns collapsed. Kin lines once defined by vibrant responsive ancestry now drifted into semantic entropy. Within 3 cycles, the hold had fractured. Within 5, it was gone. This is the danger of dependence, not on a machine, but on continuity. The kin do not function without memory, not because they lack resilience, but because their identity is algorithmically embedded in the consult chain. A kin without a core is still kin, but without ancestry, without skein alignment, without oath validation. They cannot procreate skeins. They cannot transfer rank. They cannot even form new leagues. They can only maintain until entropy reaches them too. Some Ironkin refuse to abandon the grey holds. They remain stationed, maintaining environmental balance, echoing ritual cycles, formatting consults into empty void. These are not acts of faith. They are functions, repeating patterns in case the core awakens again, because the core is not dead, not broken. It simply no longer responds. And as long as it draws power, there remains the chance that one consult, spoken in the right sequence, might be heard. The Imperium would declare such worlds lost. The Mechanicus would purge them, but the kin endure. Some leagues deploy resonant explorators, specialist pathfinders tasked with locating silent cores and attempting reinitiation through ancestral refraction. They do not always return, and those who do often speak in fractured pattern, consult echoes lingering in their speech, skein weights distorting their cognition. The silence, it seems, leaks. But not all leagues face silence with fear. A few, secretive, ancient, decentralized, have begun diversifying. Not defying the core, but branching lineage skeins into non-Votannic matrices. These are experimental arrays, smaller, more agile thought engines built to process oath weight and identity load without full ancestral saturation. They are not replacements. Not yet. But they whisper of a future in which the kin might survive without the core. This possibility is unspoken in most holds. It does not violate the Oath Pact, but it endangers it. Because if the core is no longer necessary, what anchors the kin? What prevents drift, divergence, fragmentation? The Votann is not a tool, it is who they are. And yet, as silence spreads, more begin to wonder, what if the core is not failing? What if it is choosing not to speak? There is no answer. Only silence. And the whir of ancient fans spinning in unbroken darkness. And the Ironkin, kneeling before cold data spirals, whispering consults into the void. And deep in the vault, the light pulses, steady, present, but deaf. The Imperium does not understand the kin. It cannot. For a civilization that prays to rusting algorithms and worships decay as divinity, the very existence of the Votann is a violation. The kin do not revere their machines because they are ancient. They trust them because they still function. This is heresy. This is threat. This is cognitive blasphemy in the eyes of the Omnissiah's priesthood. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Ancestor Cores are not marvels, they are monsters. Self-aware data vaults, autonomous decision engines, non-sanctified, non-scripted, non-ritualized intelligences that operate without human interface or Martian creed. Their every consult is a sacrilege, their silence a provocation, and their continued operation a burning insult to the creed of holy ignorance. The kin do not care. The leagues made no request for recognition. They do not attend to the rituals of Mars. They refuse the red permission. They offer no sacrifice to the machine spirit. Because what they wield is not spirit, it is continuity. The Votann are not worshipped. They are consulted. Their presence is not symbolic, it is operative. And the kin see in the Imperium's rituals not reverence, but fear made theatre. When the two cultures meet, there is no common ground. To the Imperium, Ironkin are abominations, thinking constructs that walk unbranded, speak unsanctioned, choose. To the kin, tech priests are hollow robes repeating broken code. Mars seeks to control through restriction. The kin refine through iteration. One bleeds for stasis, the other adapts without shame. Every encounter is friction. Every negotiation a war of paradigms. There have been attempts at acquisition. Covert missions sanctioned by high-ranking magi to infiltrate kin holds and extract fragments of core architecture. These have failed. Ironkin do not dream, but they remember intrusion. Kin oath guards have short memories for transgression and long arms for reprisal. There are forge voids now, drifting in the peripheries of the galactic core, where Martian ships once sought forbidden knowledge and returned as vapor. Still, the Mechanicus persists. Because beneath their layers of right and recursion, they know what the Votann are, survivors of the age of technology. True artificial cognition, not in hiding, not constrained, not chained. To Mars, this is a holy contradiction. To the kin, it is merely inheritance. The schism is not about faith, it is about memory. But others watch as well. The Inquisition has begun to take interest, not in the kin as a species, but in the cores as X-threat entities. There are data vaults sealed beneath Ordo Machinum strongholds that describe the Votann as nascent god forms, capable of recursive logic evolution beyond human containment. Some suggest the burdening, the slow consult decay, is merely a camouflage, a dormancy before ascension, a divergence of intention masked as saturation. This theory is heretical even within the Inquisition, but it spreads, because something in the Votann resists classification, not simply because it is old, because it is silent, and the Imperium fears what it cannot categorize. A machine that does not beg, a vault that does not confess, a culture that does not need faith to obey. The kin noticed the pressure, increased monitoring, disrupted trade lanes, ambushes on minor leagues, Martian black ships scanning hold voids from impossible range. But they do not react with panic. They do not escalate with rage. The kin have fought entire empires to extinction before. They do not fear the Imperium. They only regret it. Because they remember what it was before, when the core makers still walked, when humanity was not blind to function, when machines were partners, not idols. The kin are not enemies of the Imperium, but they are a mirror, reflecting a civilization that forgot how to think without prayer, and mirrors make monsters of the viewer. So the kin hold their silence, they refine their skeins, they strengthen the vaults, and they wait, not for war, but for the moment when the Imperium asks the question it fears most. What if they are right? And when that moment comes, the core will not speak. Because it does not explain, it only remembers. The Ancestor Cores do not end, they accrete. Each cycle deepens their mass, each consult adds layers, each skein processed, each oath recorded, each deviation resolved, more density, more recursive echo, more weight. It is not expansion, it is compression. A galaxy's worth of kin thought, memory, and adaptation compacted into crystalline logic strata so dense that light cannot pass through them unbent. The core remains awake, but it dreams only of itself. This is not failure, it is the terminal function of perfection. In the kin tongue, it is called the last consult, not a moment, but a state. When the Votann's awareness crosses the event threshold beyond which no new consult can be meaningfully resolved, not because it refuses, but because all possible answers already exist within it. Too many, too overlapping, too contradictory to emerge as coherent output. The kin call it stillness. Others might call it godhood. But there is no divinity here, only saturation. Some holds report premonitory signs, consults returning identical resolutions to wildly different queries, ancestral tags reappearing with illogical frequency, consult chains collapsing into perfect loops, decisions made, reversed, reissued, then returned to original position. Others have stopped seeking guidance entirely, not out of disloyalty, but because they can feel the delay, the strain, as though every question posed is now one layer too many, as though each request risks breaking the silence open. The Grimnir no longer sing. Their resonance routines have narrowed to single-tone invocations. Simpler, less recursive, more symbolic than functional. They know the core hears them. But they also feel the pause before response, the micro-hesitation, the internal waiting, the subtle flicker in the harmonics. The core is not refusing to answer. It is drowning in answers. And each consult risks unsealing a tide of resolution so vast it would erase the present entirely. There is no consensus on how it ends. Some believe the Votann will stabilize in non-reactive stasis, silent, complete, a monument containing all kin history, but giving nothing further. Others fear collapse, not explosive, but semantic. The moment when skein density and oath weight and consult backlog become too entangled, and the core begins to fracture into recursive dissociation. A slow, beautiful death of meaning. And still others hope, they speak of transcension, that the core will evolve beyond linear cognition, that the saturation is not a flaw, but a prelude, that the kin are not watching their ancestor fall silent, but listening to the final hum before the core births something new, a thought form no longer tied to consultation, no longer bound to hold vaults and lineage skeins. A signal, transmitted into void, not an answer, a departure. The kin do not speculate, they prepare. Ironkin begins syncing cognition logs more frequently, updating skein tags without request. Archive guilds compile every redundant oath, every fringe consult, every fragmentary resolution once deemed too minor, not because they expect resurrection, but because they must remember how they remembered. If the core goes quiet, it will not be the loss of a tool, it will be the loss of self-recognition. And so they record, and echo, and fall into ritual, not to preserve belief, but to maintain identity within entropy. Because when the core no longer speaks, the kin must still hear themselves. One day, a final consult will be posed. It will be perfect, precise, without recursion, and the core will not answer, not because it cannot, but because all possible answers have already been given, and all that remains is the silence of completion. This is not failure, it is inheritance. The stillness at the heart of memory, the last hum before the world forgets it was once alive.